Okay. Want to welcome everybody to August Technical Night. It's August the 27th of 2021. We got some new faces here, or some old, we got not old faces, returning faces. John and Garrett, and Mary's one of our new members, and who else we got here? And Alan's a returning member as well. So I'm glad to see we got some new folks here tonight, and so hopefully we'll have a couple more people come in while we get started here. Just a couple of announcements. I just wanted to remind everybody the assignments for the next few months for competition on September is Rainy Day. Be sure to read the descriptions for these upcoming assignments, because they are pretty, the judges are getting a little stricter about what they're looking for. So, read those assignment things on our webpage, and so that you understand what they're looking for. So September's Rainy Day, October is Capturing Motion, and November is Auto, Trucks, and Motorcycles. So, and there's a long explanation about, especially the one for November, Auto, Trucks, and Motorcycles. So read that. Be sure to read that. Our technical nights, obviously tonight is Capturing Motion, which will get you ready for your October assignment. September, we're going to have a returning speaker that we had last year, Colleen Minick, who is from Arizona, and she's going to be talking about, she's pretty she's a landscape photographer, so she gets into the details of things, and so she's going to be talking about the name of her talk is In Depth on Depth. This is very Colleen, creating dimension in landscape photography. So this is actually a pretty good talk, and I know you're going to get something out of this, especially if you shoot landscape, but it can help you with other types of shots as well. So Colleen will be talking, and hopefully she was the one that got to experience the Zoom bombers when we had her on last year. So hopefully things will be a little calmer this time. And then in October, we're going to have Jerry Jones doing glass refraction photography, where she does everything right in her house. Everything's done. It's glass, it's bottles with a pattern behind that on her TV set actually, and she photographs these really cool and really interesting type of photography. So she's gonna be in our October meeting. November, we do not have a technical night. So this month, and then September, October will be the last of our technical nights. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to put out for us? No? Okay, then we'll go ahead and get started with the program, so we can let you know. Jim Sykes is not here tonight. He's out of town. So he took the time and actually created a 36-minute video on capturing motion. And what Robert's going to do is help us answer any questions, because Jim, can be pretty technical. And without him be here to answer the questions, we needed Robert to answer the questions about that. Then at the end, I'm going to show you a technique that I use to create some motion, implied motion in some photographs. And it should only take probably 10 or 15 minutes at the most. And that's pretty much what we're going to do tonight. And this is all be recorded. So unlike when we have our special speakers, which we do not record because they have, proprietary information that they're giving us, this one will be recorded so you can go back to it. So anytime it's one of us doing the talk, one of the club members, then we go ahead and record it for y'all. So I guess we'll go ahead, and I'm going to have to share my screen, and then I'm going to bring the video up that Jim did for us. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. With quick time there. Can you see the video?
Yes.
The screen for the video? Okay. Let me go ahead and start it. Everybody ready?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, everybody. Sorry that I can't be here live and in person to talk to you guys tonight. I'm out of town on business, but I did promise that I would do a presentation for technical night tonight on the topic of motion photography, capturing motion, to help you out with the October assignment. I have a presentation that I put together mostly in Lightroom for you, but also includes a couple of clips that I did in my office. Let's go ahead and get started with it. Okay, something I want to mention with respect to this presentation is it's not so much a tutorial. This is more intended to be inspirational for you, to give you some ideas for some creative methods that you can use to capture motion and hopefully get some interesting images to submit in the October competition. Now, if you want some actual specific technical help with any of this, feel free to contact me to get with me to schedule some time, schedule with Robert. He can help you with any of this as well, or feel free to do some research online. So I want to start out with the easiest thing first, the thing that most people probably already have some types of images of in their catalog, is using slow shutter speed, also known as dragging the shutter, to capture some motion in images. Now, I'm willing to bet that there's going to be a lot of people that their first instinct is go into the catalog and find some pictures like this, dig up some waterfalls shot with slow shutter speed and enter them in competition. The one thing I want to say about that I want you to think about is we all expect to see waterfalls like this. When we see a waterfall photographed and presented like this, for the most part, we really don't even stop and think about the motion. This is just how we've been conditioned for the most part to see a waterfall. So when we look at this, we think, oh, this is a pretty picture of a waterfall. The motion doesn't necessarily play through as being a strong element, which is what this competition is about. So I'm going to caution you about just digging into your catalog, finding some waterfall pictures and saying, okay, I'm going to enter these in the competition. Something that would be more appropriate to what we're talking about would be something like this, not an image that's an overall picture of a waterfall in a landscape, something that actually is intended to highlight the motion of the water within that waterfall. This would be a much higher scoring image as far as I'm concerned if I were to be judging this versus one of these, even though they're nice images with respect to the topic being capture motion and make the motion be a primary part of your subject. These would count less as a score than something like this would. This is something to keep in mind, that even when you're not shooting for competition, that you can use motion to tell part of your story. This is kind of a windy, blustery day out there, and this little windmill blurring in the wind shows that. That's something to think about, using the appropriate slow shutter speed in all kinds of circumstances other than just water for moving objects. Clouds are great things that will move across your scene for motion. If you shoot it at a time like this was actually well after sunset, very long exposure, but no neutral density filter needed because it was actually very dark, but the very long exposure brought out the really deep colors in the sky after the sunset and let those clouds move across the sky and become a strong visual element in the composition. Vehicles are great to photograph, especially when you can get a longer shutter speed. At night is a great time to do it like this. This is streetcars in Ybor City. You can very easily set up on a tripod, go to a slow shutter speed. You don't have to worry about neutral density filters because it's already dark out. Go to a low ISO, go to a closed down aperture, and you can manipulate your shutter speeds to get something that's going to be appropriate for moving objects like this. Let them move through your frame. Here's another instance, slow shutter speed, just pouring some sugar over blueberries, no flash used in this just ambient light and an appropriate shutter speed just set up to capture the motion of that sugar falling down and bouncing around on the blueberries. Another thing that's great, if you've been to the fair, been to a carnival, have an opportunity to go to a fair or carnival, illuminated rides at night are great for motion and the effects that you can get with them. Another example, if you can get static elements in the image as well and not just focus on an object that's moving. As in this case, we've got some people there getting their picture taken. You've got the burger stand here. These things actually help balance and offset the motion. So if you want to be able to work with slow shutter speeds in daylight or brightly lit situations, or if you actually want to get an extremely slow shutter speed, neutral density filters are an option that you can work with to cut down on the light entering the camera and get you into the ranges of shutter speeds that you're going to want to work with. Another thing I'm going to caution you about at this point with respect to competition is with a neutral density filter, you can actually totally eliminate motion, and they're used for that reason with situations like this, moving water and stuff, to actually take the motion away and out of the scene. So be cautious about that, because that's not what October's competition is about. It's about showing motion, not removing the motion. Now, in an instance like this, you've got the motion of the clouds during the day in a long shutter speed used with neutral density filter. Again, I'm going to put this out there. This is an example I had in my catalog from using a neutral density filter in the daytime for a long shutter speed to blur the clouds. In this instance, they accentuate the composition. This would not be a good entry for the competition, because in this case, that building with the geometric designs in it is actually the subject, and the moving clouds streaking across the sky are just an accentuating element and not primary to the image. So this is an example of the technique of using neutral density filter, but it would not actually be a good entry for the competition that we're discussing. Now, if you've read the description of the competition for October, one of the things that it mentions that we will accept for the competition with respect to showing motion is animated GIF images. Now I'm going to have to go ahead and jump out of Lightroom here to give you an example, because Lightroom does not support display of GIF image format. I was out one day and the sky was just beautiful with these clouds moving quickly across the sky, and I knew they would make a nice time lapse. So I actually set up a camera and I made 500 exposures of clouds moving across the sky. It actually created a time lapse from those 500 exposures that was 30 seconds long. Now, what I've done here, I took 20 of those 500 exposures and created an animated GIF image that runs for 3 seconds from 20 exposures, and it's continuously looping. So as soon as you activate it, it continuously loops. If you're interested in doing this for competition, as the description says on the website, we will accept this. And this would be interesting to see some creative uses of this. Once you have a time lapse, if you've even done any other time lapse sequences in the past, be aware that you can take a sequence of those images and create an animated GIF. You don't want to take 500 or 1,000 and make an animated GIF. That's going to be a little bit difficult to do. As I said, this was done from 20 consecutive files to create this 3-second looping animation. Intentional camera motion, also abbreviated as ICM, is something that I know several of the members of the club have been experimenting with lately and getting creative with. This is something that I know Robert has been fascinated with lately and has been producing some very creative images using this technique. It simply refers to intentionally moving your camera to render motion in your scene. I've done this many times over the years on different occasions. I dug some up out of my catalog. Some of these are actually pretty old. This one, for instance, is one of my first ICM experiments ever. This goes back almost 20 years ago that I made this image. This was done driving down the road. I've done this fairly often. Grabbed a camera, picked it up, pointed it out the windshield, and shoot as I drive. Sometimes, especially at night, twilight, you can get some very interesting effects with a slow shutter speed. Here's another example. You may notice some differences in these. You'll notice that this one has some very smooth, swirly, curvy kind of effects to what's going on with the motion in it. That comes from hand holding the camera while pointing it out the windshield of the vehicle. My arms, hands, etc., my body are absorbing some of the road vibration and smoothing it out. And that's why you see these, S curves and snake-looking things in the highlights versus this image, which is done by having the camera propped on the steering wheel, and it gives you a much more jagged, much more sharp look to the lights traveling through the image. That comes from the road vibration being transmitted directly through the vehicle, the steering column, and the steering wheel into the camera. So you get much sharper and smaller vibrations versus just hand holding the camera up to the windshield while you're driving down the road. If you're doing this, just remember, be safe. This was actually done while a passenger in a vehicle, just holding the camera out of the passenger window, going by trees with fall colors, going around the curve in the road and holding the camera out the window. Here's a little bit different method of ICM. This is another image that was done on one of our camera club field trips. This was shot from one of the bridges downtown toward the skyline. This is putting the camera on a tripod and using a zoom lens and zooming in and out of the scene. And you can get lots of different effects using a zoom lens. If you happen to have any old push-pull type zoom lenses around and have a camera that they'll go on or can adapt them to a current model camera, a push-pull zoom lens can give you much smoother travel and lines in it than a rotating lens, because you tend to jitter and jiggle and induce some other motion into the system when you rotate a zoom lens versus a push-pull barrel zoom lens. Multiple exposure, I know, was last week's competition topic. Taking multiple exposures in camera or compositing multiple exposures together can be a useful technique to give the impression of motion within an image. I've got a couple examples of my own here that I grabbed for this presentation. They're done by having one exposure showing an object in motion and then another exposure with static objects. In this particular instance, we have an old image that I did of sea oats. One very slow shutter speed catching them blowing around, and one fast shutter speed showing them static so that you know what the image is, then combining the two images together into a final shot and giving the impression of sea oats blowing in the wind. I've got something here with a little technically more complex to pull off. The clouds and the sky in this image are from one exposure. The foreground is the actual foreground in the scene, but it had to be recorded as a second exposure. In this instance, the sky was a 2-minute long exposure. Now the stars and the clouds were all shot in one 2-minute exposure. Now the reason the stars happen to not be streaks moving as stars do across the sky and normally would be in a 2-minute exposure on a tripod is because I had my camera mounted on a device called a star tracker. It's actually a motorized mount that allows your camera to pan across the sky at exactly the same rate that the stars are moving through the sky. That way, in a long exposure, your stars won't streak. So during this 2-minute exposure, the camera was tracking with the stars to get a nice deep sky photo. You can see some Milky Way, you can see the Andromeda galaxy in there, some other star clusters, but there were also clouds moving through the scene. They were moving up the valley. This was in New Mexico the last time I was out there, and the streaking clouds really gave a great motion impression to the image. Now, the reason the trees in the foreground are a separate exposure is because the camera was in motion for 2 minutes tracking the stars, which means that the foreground, the trees, the mountains, etc., all were blurred because the camera was very slowly moving for 2 minutes. So the foreground was a blurry mess. So I then had to turn the star tracker off so that the camera just sat still and recorded a second exposure of the foreground. As I recall, this was about a 30-second exposure for the foreground to get the trees, the mountains, the valley, etc. And then in post-processing, the two images were composited together to bring back the original scene with the streaking clouds through the sky for that strong motion impression within the image. This is a technique I came up with on my own about 2 years ago as an experiment. I call it synchronized dual camera composite. I'm sure that I'm not the first person to have thought of this. I would imagine that there might be some other information out there online. However, because I've never looked it up, because I kind of came up with this myself to do it on my own, I don't know if there is another official name for this out there or not. This is just what I called it when I came up with it. And I'm going to break away here for a second to show you how you can use this technique. It actually involves using two cameras to photograph the same scene. One camera taking a slow shutter speed and the other camera synchronized by the first camera to fire and take a fast exposure of the same scene. And then you take the two images and composite them together for the final presentation. Items that you need for this technique are two cameras, two lenses, radio transmitter, radio receiver, shutter release cable, and an item that's referred to as dual microphone bar, stereo microphone bar. There's a bunch of different names for it, adjustable microphone bar. This is specifically what I actually use. You can see that in the photo. You can get them from Amazon or music stores. But that's the additional item that you're going to need, which you can see that those two cameras are attached to. That allows you to hold both cameras in your hand at the same time as if they were one large camera. Okay, let me show you how this rig works. You got two cameras connected on that crossbar that we talked about a minute ago. You've got two lenses, ideally matched up close to each other in focal length field of view. Zoom lenses are good for being able to make that match. You've got radio transmitter on camera number one, radio receiver on camera number two. Output of radio receiver is wired to remote trigger input on camera number two. This is the way it works. Camera number one, slow shutter speed, and it's got rear curtain sync firing the transmitter. So you're working, you're panning with the action, you're moving around, whatever kind of motion blur you want to induce happens with camera number one. At the very end of the exposure, it fires the radio transmitter, which triggers this camera to take a fast motion image at the end, which you then composite with the image from this unit right here. Now, let me show you a couple of examples that I made when I experimented with this one night at a roller derby bout. As I mentioned, I took this rig out to the roller derby track one night to experiment with it. And here are a couple of the images that I used putting together from the two cameras. As I said, one camera being a slow shutter speed, one camera being a fast shutter speed. And I experimented with various different slow shutter speeds in combination with various fast shutter speeds, and took a lot of images to get things worked out to where I ended up happy with a few things. This is one of the early experimental images that I did, putting things together, just shooting some action on the track, just standing stationary, letting the skaters move in front of the camera. Then I took to panning the rig, and I actually got some results that I really enjoyed by panning the rig and getting one streaking motion from one camera and one frozen action scene from the other camera to put together. Here's another example that I particularly liked from that technique, putting them together. I also tried something more in the vein of intentional camera motion with just kind of swirling and moving the rig around in my hands, got some pretty bizarre things, but also came up with some very interesting things doing that swirling motion with the cameras, and got some abstract artistic stuff. Pretty much everything I've been talking about so far tonight is related to slow shutter speeds to blur some things to show some motion in your image. Fast shutter speed is also an option that we're accepting for this assignment, using fast shutter speed to stop or freeze motion to render it in a way that the eye normally does not see, therefore being creative with something in motion and showing it in a way that is not normally seen. In a case like this, it's not that out there, just tide rolling in, but a very fast shutter speed. So you get all the little splashes and everything, but you get the impression that the water is definitely moving in on the beach and rolling over the rocks. With water again, here's something a little more interesting. This is just a water fountain. This is just the water coming out of an old-fashioned drinking fountain that you push the button and the water comes out, but just photographed at a very high speed to render it in a way that you would never see it with your eye. The technical aspect of using a fast shutter speed doesn't need a lot of explanation. I'm throwing it in here though to remind you that it is another technique that you can use to get some images for this competition, not to forget about this as an option in your arsenal. So I'll take a break for a minute to tell you something interesting about the shirt that I'm wearing here. My mom happened to be at the mall, saw it on a sale rack, saw it had a picture of a camera, said, "Oh, Jim might be interested in this," got it for me as a gift. And coincidentally, she has no idea, I actually own this camera. Front curtain sync flash is also just your normal flash. In almost any situation, if you put a flash on your camera's hot shoe, use a pop-up flash, use a camera with a built-in flash, then you're typically using front curtain sync flash. It's typically not even described as front curtain sync flash. It's typically just flash when you go in and work with it in your camera, but it does work differently than rear curtain. And I'm going to just show you a couple examples. This is a basic technique. It's not that difficult to do. Use a flash, get something in motion, and use the flash to help you light up the scene and freeze the motion. Another example, we had the musician jumping with the guitar a minute ago, got a dancer here. Pretty simple techniques, but it's good motion storytelling, and flash was essential to making the image work. Now, the images we saw a moment ago were front curtain sync with a high shutter speed in order to not allow any blurring to occur in the image. You can combine the technique of using a slow shutter speed to let your subject blur somewhat in the scene while also using front curtain sync flash to get a frozen image of the object. It's almost like getting two images in one. It's kind of like the compositing multiple exposure we were talking about earlier, except it happens in camera with one press of the shutter button. You get an ambient light, slow exposure where the subject blurs, and then you get a fast illuminated exposure from the flash that freezes the same subject. Here's a silly little example that I put together. And this is one of the things that I'm using this example for to show you with front curtain sync flash is depending on the direction an object is moving in your scene. When you use this technique, the blur trail will be what we consider to be the wrong direction. In this case, we've got a rocket pointed upward in the sky. You would think, okay, the rocket is taking off, launching into space. However, if you look at the blur trail, it makes it look like, no, that rocket's falling out of the sky backwards. Even though the rocket was moving in the forward direction, because this was done with front curtain sync during a slow shutter speed, the front curtain sync, the flash fired at the very beginning of the exposure, froze the image of the rocket, and then the rocket continued to move forward direction through the scene and created that blur. And when this happens, front curtain sync with a moving object often gives the impression to the viewer that the object is moving in reverse. That's why we want to use rear curtain sync as an option for things like this. So if we switch our camera over to rear curtain sync flash and use a slow shutter speed, you can get a scene where it actually looks like the object is traveling forward, because now what happens is your shutter opens up without flash. Time goes by, the object moves through the scene, creates its blur trail, and at the end of the exposure, the flash fires and freezes the object that's in motion. So these shots were done identically. The rocket was photographed in studio and then just composited into a background that I shot in New Mexico. But the rocket was moving in the same direction in both cases in the studio, but just front curtain sync, rear curtain sync. I'll show you what was actually done. This image is flipped over, took the rocket in the studio up on a ladder, dropping the rocket downward and letting it streak through the scene, and using front curtain, rear curtain sync, getting it. And then this was flipped vertically 180 degrees and composited with the background sky. Now, this is something that's kind of important to note. This is a scene where the rocket was dropped in the reverse direction. So the rocket was dropping fins first. The rocket was actually flying backwards in this scene, and this was done with front curtain sync. So the object itself was deliberately set to move in reverse with front curtain sync. So in this case, the flash fired at the beginning of the exposure, freezing the rocket, and then the rocket continued to travel through the scene backwards direction, creating that streak. You notice it's a little crooked. Rocket isn't actually very aerodynamic when it's flying backwards, and it tends to tip over. But the reason I'm showing you this is if you're not experienced with using rear curtain sync, don't have rear curtain sync as an option, and you still want to create something like this, you can use front curtain sync if you're going to photograph an object that can be made to move in reverse. Actually, back in the old days, cameras did not have rear curtain sync, and automotive photographers that wanted to get pictures of cars with a blur streak behind them would actually have the driver of the car drive backwards through the shot, and they would use front curtain sync. And then the final image actually made it appear as though the car were driving forward through the shot because of the direction of the blur. So of course, this is just playing around in studio, putting some composites together, but it does have some applications in real life as well. Miss Leslie in our camera club actually assisted me with this photo shoot. We had this model, Liz Sparkles. She's actually a clothing designer. She designs LED club clothing for going out dancing in clubs. The clothes light up with different colored LEDs. And we took her out on the streets of Ybor and had her dance around in her LED clothes and photographed her. So this is a shot with rear curtain sync. She was swirling and twirling through the scene. And then at the end of a slow exposure, the flash fired, and captured her looking at the camera at the end of the exposure after swirling her clothing around for the effect. So there's a real world example of using rear curtain sync with a slow shutter speed to capture blur and freezing the motion and having it look the way you might expect it to look. Another thing you can do with most modern speed lights is high speed sync flash, often abbreviated as HSS. When you use this option, you can actually break free of the shutter synchronization speed limit that your camera has. It's a technical subject that I won't go into right now, but depending on your camera, you're typically going to have a shutter speed limitation of 1/250th of a second to 1/180th of a second, somewhere around in there with most modern cameras. That's the highest speed you can actually use your camera with for a shutter speed, along with a speed light. Now, there is a technical technique that allows that shutter speed limit to be broken, and typical high-speed sync capable speed lights can go up to an 8,000th of a second these days as far as synchronizing with the camera for shutter speed. For this example, that's exactly what I did. I pushed it to the limit to 1/8,000th of a second. One of the reasons that this becomes a useful technique is the scene I'm going to show you right here. A couple weeks ago, it was raining at my house. My wife has these flowers planted out in the yard, but it happened to be sunny as well. So the sun was shining while it was raining, a sun shower. These flowers were out there, and I realized this was a perfect time to demonstrate this technique. I wanted the background to be blurry. I didn't want you to see neighbors' houses, the street, cars, garages, etc. I just wanted the trees in the background and everything to blur out with some nice bokeh. So I needed to shoot this at a wide open aperture. So even with a low ISO, when you get a wide open aperture on the camera in daylight, your shutter speed is going to have to be faster than that synchronization speed limit of typically 1/180th of a second, 1/250th of a second. 1/250th of a second was the limit on this camera. However, in order to get that blurry background in full daylight,
Has everyone else lost the sound?
Yes.
I think
Well-
it's froze.
I lost the motion and sound.
and let the background go dark
Notice that.
and out of focus. So in a situation like that, high-speed sync is definitely your friend with the flash. The one thing to be aware of, part of the technical limitations of using high-speed sync means that you have a drastic reduction in output power. You really can't illuminate something that's very far away from you with a flash on high-speed sync. In this instance, the flash was actually about 12 inches from the flower and firing on high-speed sync. And finally, I'm going to show you another technique that you can use with modern speed lights. Modern speed lights have a burst flash option, which gives a strobe effect. It's where the flash fires very rapidly. They are typically programmable. You can program them to how many flashes per second you want to have. The last thing I want to demonstrate for you tonight is an option in most modern speed lights. It's called burst flash. It's basically a strobe effect. The flash actually continues to flash multiple times throughout an exposure. You can typically program that in most flashes or speed lights. You can tell it how many times per second you want that flash to occur. I'm going to tell you when you do this, if you want to do this, be aware if you're going to do this for an extended period of time or to take multiple pictures with it, that constant strobing flash effect, all those multiple flashes happening in rapid sequence will heat up your speed light very quickly, and you have to be aware of overheating. If your speed light happens to just shut off and stop working, then it probably went into thermal overload protection. Set it aside for 10 minutes, let it cool down, turn it back on again. It'll probably work for you, but be aware in the first place, try and give that speed light a rest in between exposures to let it cool down, because it will heat up very quickly when you're using this effect. Now, the first example I'm going to show you is so that you have a reference to see the difference. This first example is not burst flash. This is actually one of the techniques we talked about a little earlier. This is rear curtain sync with a slow shutter speed. I set up some marbles on my kitchen floor on a black cloth, used a slow shutter speed. This was a 1 second exposure, rolled a big marble into a cluster of small marbles and let the rear curtain sync flash freeze the action at the end of the exposure. I did this so you could see the difference of doing exactly the same thing, a 1 second long exposure, group of marbles, big marble crashing into them, But in this case, the flash was programmed in burst mode for 8 flashes per second. So the next shot that you're going to see is a 1 second long exposure with 8 flash bursts during that 1 second. You can see it's a drastic difference, both 1 second exposures of the same thing happening. But in this case, every marble that you see here has 8 different images of it during the time of the exposure of 1 second. So that flash just rapidly fired 8 times and caught 8 individual still images of these marbles. This technique is something that works well in a high contrast scene where you have bright objects on a dark background. I've seen other examples of billiards tables with billiard balls moving for trick shots and things like that. It's a special effects technique that is available to you in most modern speedlights as an option, and something that you can think about for doing something a little creative, a little out of the box. And last of all, I thought you might like to see the furry little assistant that I had helping me when I did the marble sequences for the demonstration. That's my little cat, Cheeto. Well, that wraps things up for tonight. Thanks for being able to join me virtually from my office here. It was nice to be able to do this for you. I hope that you guys have been inspired to get out there, try something new, be creative, turn in something interesting for your motion assignment in October. I miss you guys, and I'm looking forward to the next time around when hopefully I get to be more in person and interact with you guys. See you later. Good night.
Well, what'd you think, guys?
My brain exploded multiple times.
Mine also. I'm like, okay, yeah.
Well, that's
Oh, good.
the beauty of having it recorded is you can go back and listen to it over and over again. There are sections of it that you want to listen to. So.
And have my brain explode over and over again?
Yeah, your brain can explode over and over again.
That whole flash thing was like, huh? And
Yeah.
especially when he started mounting things and radio converters and, catching Mars, it was like, okay, never mind on that one. I will skip that one.
I have put in the chat box and a website that explains high-speed sync and also explains that, as he pronounced it, GIF or GIF or GIF, how to do them. So if you look in the chat box, there will be 2 links.
Can any flash do that?
Any modern flash, yes.
Okay. When are you going out of town? No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really isn't as that hard as far as the thinking of the high-speed flash. It's just a matter of setting the flash to a certain setting, and it's usually marked with HSS. Once you set it to that setting, you can then take your shutter speed and move it from the one, as he mentioned with Canon's 1/250th of a second. If you have a Pentax 1/180th of a second, Nikon I think is 1/250th as well. You move it from that setting to, and in the manual mode, by the way, to 1/1000, 1/2000th of a second. And what's happening is the flash is firing many small amounts of flash while the curtain is opening and closing, and it's doing it so fast, 1/10,000th of a second, mini flashes, that you don't even notice it. So there's a bunch of bursts of flash in the time that that your shutter opens and closes, whereas what we're used to seeing is a single burst flash, but this is doing many small ones. It's doing it so fast that you can't even see it.
Do you set that up on the flash? I mean, last
Yes.
time I used my flash was one time and that was it. It's sitting in my, so you set it up in the flash?
Yeah, just a flash. It's just a simple button you push it, and it'll convert it to high speed sync.
And do you set the number of flashes or it
Now,
does
what
by
the, no,
itself?
the second thing he was talking about was multi-flash. Now that's the one. Yeah, he mentioned two of them, high speed sync and then multi. Multi flash is more like, you can see that one. You can see several bursts of a flash at the time. And so yes, you can, most modern flash units have that on it. So it's a matter of going to multi. If you look at the mode on your flash, you simply cycle through the mode. You'll see three modes generally. You'll see manual, which you set the output of how much light is coming from that flash, and it will give you a finite amount. And then you have TTL, which is through the lens metering, which the flash will then send out a flash, somewhat of a pre-flash, to measure how much light is needed, and then give you the appropriate flash for that scene. And that's usually done when people are doing what we call in the event industry run and gun. And run and gun is when you don't want to set your camera, your flash unit, and you're moving from place to place. You generally set your camera in the P mode, and some people call that professional. I call it stupidity, but that's just me. P mode means program, and you set your flash to TTL so that the camera and the flash will talk to each other. It's a common thing that event photographers do. And so it ensures that you're going to get the camera and while the camera and the flash are talking to each other, you are getting a pretty darn good exposure each time. That's TTL. And then there's a third one, and it's called multi. And multi is when you set the number of flashes to happen in a given time, meaning I want 5 bursts of light. And I'm going to hold my shutter open, my shutter speed to be 1 second. And I'm going to move something within that 1 second. And it's going to, the flash, you're going to see it fire 5 times. So that's the interval that you can set up with a multi-mode. Most of us ignore it. We look on the camera, I mean, on the flash unit, and we go like, what's that mode? And you press it and you're like, it's not doing anything. Okay, fine. Because you have to set 2 settings. You have to set not only the number of flashes, but how quickly will that happen? So we tend to avoid it. That's what Jim was referring to when he said the multi with the pool balls.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
so with that shot that he did of the marbles, could you have done that shot without a flash?
No. If the marbles are in motion, something has to freeze the action.
What, doesn't your shutter speed do that?
Well, that would mean you'd have to shoot one shot, move the marbles, shoot another shot, move the marbles, shoot the shot again, and move the marbles. But if you want then you'd have several static shots of a marble
I
being
see what you're
moved.
saying. I
But
got
if
it.
you want the blur to appear,
You
then
need
you'd have to have some sort of slow shutter speed in there in order to accommodate that.
but you would need the strobing from that thing.
Yes.
Okay, got it. My head's right with you, Brian.
Well, one of the things that's kind of funny is that Jim and I used to do these workshops where Jim would start it off where he'd do all the talking, and then people would then turn and look at me and go like, okay, what did he just say?
I'm there. Especially when he got that thing out there and put the 2 cameras side by side and started talking about radios. I'm like, okay.
Now that is a very, very, very simple technique if anyone is interested, and I don't mean to bore anybody, but what he's doing is he's telling your camera to fire just like you would do if you had a simple remote control. If you had a remote control, or you would simply plug the remote into the side of the camera, and instead of doing, let's say you're doing a landscape, you didn't want any vibration from your camera, you take the remote control, plug it into your camera, and you press the remote control, and it would fire the shutter. That's a simple technique that we understand. But what he's doing is he's saying that the 2 cameras are not firing at the same time. They're firing at 2 different times based on the rear curtain sync. And the way the rear curtain sync, as he so eloquently explained it, is that you press a button at a certain speed and let's say 1 second exposure. At the end of 1 second, the camera sends from one remote triggers the other camera to fire as though, just like you were standing out there pressing the button. So it is not that hard to comprehend in the fact that the second camera is at a fast shutter speed.
Jack, I'm coming over to your house.
So he's just got a nice little rig that he's put that on.
Yeah.
But once you set it up and press the button on one and it fires the other, you go like, oh, well, that's quite simple. So it's not really that hard.
Any other questions, guys? Oh, come on, there's got to be more questions.
Now, I will tell you that I thought that presentation was excellent. I did not know Jim could talk that softly and put together images at the same time. That was impressive. And he did it all without me.
So Robert, is the remote system he used to fire 2 cameras, is that the same as the remote system for off-camera flash?
Exactly the same.
Okay,
Exactly the same.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you set up your, you could set up a rear curtain flash for your camera. If you had a camera in your flash, that'd be the same thing. That's exactly what it's doing. It's only telling it when to shoot. That's all it is.
Okay.
It's just connecting the 2 cameras to say, this is when you shoot. And in this particular instance, it's a rear curtain sync. So it's going to shoot at the end of the exposure rather than at the beginning. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
We're looking forward to driving down the freeway at 70 miles an hour taking photographs.
It really isn't that hard. You can have a suction cup placed with a what do they call it? Hold on just 1 second. Hold on just 1 second. I have this thing right here, if you can see it, and it mounts a cell phone. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we all are aware of that. But this little thing right here, if I take this off, you can mount there's a suction cup deal that will mount to your dash, and you can put a camera on this. The same little item, you can put let's screw this off.
Mhm.
Okay.
Put a camera on it and put it on your dash. And
But Jim said he had it on his steering wheel.
now, let's face it, Jim is a little crazy.
I remember one time when we were on a trip to Maine and I got put in a car with him and he was texting with a client for over an hour while we drove. I was absolutely terrified.
Yes. But this little piece right here, put it on your deal. And then you can also, at that point, while you're driving, with your remote control or your cable release, if we will, and that cable release, just start pressing the button and you get the same effect and a lot more safely done.
Can I suggest that you hire a driver for that day? Karen, you and I will do this together. You drive one time, I'll drive the other time.
My daughter is a prosecutor. She's in the next room. She's the one who handles county court. Should I invite her over to ask her how it works?
You mean so that you can, if you get a ticket?
I guess I should have taken advantage of my opportunity to be on the sailboat last week and try that.
Yeah.
Well, you could do it if you mounted your camera on your bike, you could do it that way too. I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be lights. It could be the stuff that you're going by on your bike.
I think you should go back on the sailboat and try it again, but it won't be bad.
Well, that's not something that's going to happen.
Well, I'll tell you
Wear a
that,
helmet, Brian, when you're taking pictures like that.
well, they call that in the photographic world, drive-by shooting. Okay, somebody stepped on my joke.
I have
Robert,
tried-
Jim the other night when he was doing flash training, said he's gonna do a class on high-speed sync coming up.
Huh?
Yeah. Yeah, he's gonna do quite a bit of, he's got a bunch of different stuff he's gonna be doing in terms of Flash, so
How was the class, by the way?
it's very good.
Good.
It was another blow your mind kind of class, but that's Jim, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so it was good. All right. I'm
Once he got into the TTL, whatever, that was okay. The other part I went to like, whatever.
so. Oh, good. Well, I'm glad it did go well. And
Any other
he should do
questions,
more of
guys?
these.
No.
think it's gonna raise the bar for next time.
Well, that's
Well,
the
now
idea.
that's
Many
that's
different
only,
options.
that's only if Jim leaves the bar. Okay, that was a bad joke. Mary didn't think it was that funny. She like looked around like, nah, that one, dude, you're gonna have to step up the game. I joined this group because you had great jokes in the beginning, but now they ain't too sure about that.
Familiarity breeds
All right,
contempt.
guys. So no more questions? I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna show you a technique that you can also, I think
Before you do that,
go
can we
ahead.
take a small quick break?
Sure.
Yeah.
Everybody, let's take a 5-minute break. Come back here at 8:05.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Hey Karen, are you in the garage?
Me?
Are you in the garage?
No, I'm on the patio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But they have the two kayaks are right behind me.
Okay.
The swimming pool is back there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just
Suffering, having to move out of our house. How's your packing going?
It's pretty well.
You done?
I can see the light at the end of the tunnel now.
All right. When's your daughter coming?
She's coming next Saturday.
Okay, all right.
She got a one-way flight here on Southwest for about $43, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, they're running sales right now. Yeah, there's not very many people flying right now, so that's I guess.
In
Yeah.
fact, the flight's going to go down because everybody knows that Florida is the hub of the Delta virus. So they're
Yeah.
giving away flights to come here.
I got my booster shot today. Hopefully it'll work.
You did, good for you.
But you had to be 8 months out in order to get that. And I didn't think anybody was going to be 8 months out until September.
Now, if you have an immunosuppression
You can get it now.
problem, you can walk in and get it right now.
Oh, okay. Well, fortunately, I don't
You don't even
qualify.
have to do that. They didn't ask questions. I had it done last week.
Well, you have to fill in a form to
Yeah.
declare that you have something, but nobody's going to check on it. But
Exactly.
I have myasthenia gravis, so that's fairly serious. You don't
Yeah.
want to mess with this stuff.
Just so you got it at CVS or someplace else.
Just go on the website.
Yeah, I went. Yeah, Walgreens and CVS are walk up with what was the first one out?
Pfizer.
Like Pfizer?
Pfizer, yeah, and then I think Publix is using Moderna.
Do they need to see your vaccination card?
They will ask for it. I had mine on my phone, but after I fiddled around a while, the guy just said, "No, I'll just fill out a new one here." And
Oh,
He put the third, there's a place for the third shot on there, actually.
okay.
And so I have 2 cards now, but if I bring them back, they said they combine them into one.
I was 6 months out, but we're going to Africa in the end of September, and I was not going to fool around with it. So
I'm waiting to, hear- I'm
Wouldn't be
waiting.
a bad idea. You still have time if, just go in and get it. I mean, Africa is not exactly.
I did it already.
Oh, you got the third one?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I
okay.
went Saturday. I was 6 months out and I did it.
I'm waiting to hear whether it's better to get a booster with the same type or a different type to, maybe.
Simple, they're gonna tell you, it has to be the same type.
Actually, the cities just come out with it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter
but why-
which one you get.
But if both are available, why would you want to mix it?
It's not a matter of mixing it. It's a matter of boosting the immune system. And what they're saying is that if you got the Moderna and you go in and get the Pfizer as a booster, it simply acts as a booster. It doesn't counter any what the other one does.
We can't see you, Robert. Turn on your camera.
Diana, you said you were going to Africa in September?
Yeah. Yeah.
My son just came back from Costa Rica, and one of the things that he was a little bit surprised with at the airport in Costa Rica, US required that he also, even though he had his vaccination cards, they required that he show a COVID test.
Right.
I know.
Yeah,
And
that's-
so he had fortunately, he had plenty of time. He had to leave the airport, go someplace, get the COVID test, get the results, and then go back and check in. So,
Well, because we're flying into to Johannesburg one day, and then the next day flying into Namibia.
yeah.
We have to get a COVID test on the 20, like we're leaving on the 30th. I have to get a COVID test on the 28th so that I can get into Joburg, and I have to get a COVID test on the 29th so I could get into Namibia.
Yes.
So it is, and then my nose is going to be falling off. So, but
All right, I think we got most everybody back. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You see my Lightroom?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. This is the kind of shot that I was talking. This is a little, not exactly the best example because the main subject is not the motion, what's in motion, but I just wanted to use this to show you how to do this. A lot of these types of shots I've seen are like over water, so that you also get the same effect on the water as you do the clouds. But I wanted to go ahead and show you how to do this so that you could, if you have a chance, you might want to try this. First thing is first, you need a day where the sky is not 100% covered with clouds. You want to see a sky where there is some blue sky, and the clouds are somewhat wispy. This wasn't a totally wispy kind of day. There were some kind of cumulus clouds out there, but it still worked out pretty well for me. And what you start out doing is you've got to have a tripod. And I start out by taking, and here is there's 92 images here. If you want to look, those are all taken with the intervalometer in my camera. So you go into your camera menu and you set up, these were done at 1/1000th of a second at 2 second intervals. The other thing is you want to make sure that the clouds are moving. You don't want to go on a day, you don't want to try this on a day where there's no wind at all. Now you don't want a gazillion of miles an hour wind because then it would move too fast. But and you can adjust the shutter speed as well. You can, if you do it a little longer, then you're going to have a little bit more of a, more flow in the ultimate picture. But here, I mean, basically what I did is these are the raw files. Okay. So I started off with one of the 90 raw files. I went ahead and I developed it. This is where it started. And this is when I did where I ended up with it. Come on, catch up, computer. There we go. And then what I did was I took all of these 91 other images, I highlighted all of them, and then I hit the sync button. And I've already been synced, so I'm not going to do that. but that's what you basically do as I mean, I can just show you here on a couple of them. When you do that, there's that sync button right here, and you just click sync, and it'll ask you which criteria that you've adjusted in Lightroom that you want to sync, and you just tell it, and then you sync it, and it does the same thing that you did to that first set image to all of them. So that's a quick way to make adjustments. And you can do it on something like this because one, you're on a tripod, and two, it's within a few minutes. It's this, the taking 90 images like this takes about 10 minutes. That's the biggest problem I have with is standing there waiting. And I'm basically in this field, I was taking pictures with my phone the whole time that the camera was shooting all these images. So once you get your raw files all together into the same, you want to take all of them and you want to transfer them over, or use the I use the Lightroom's export feature, and I create convert them all to JPEG. And the reason why you do that is because you got 90 files here. We're going to take them all into Photoshop. If you try to take 90 raw files over here, in my case, each one of these is 46 megapixels, which is a lot. If I took them all over to Photoshop, it would blow up, basically. It was just too many layers. So even when you do a time lapse, you convert them into JPEGs first, just so you know your computer in Photoshop can handle them. Now, the caveat here is, yes, Photoshop can handle these, but you still need a fairly good amount of RAM in order to do it. My computer has 40 megs of RAM, or 40 gigs of RAM, so it handles it fairly well. So basically what I ended up with is I create these little, if you see over here on catalog, I've created folders, subfolders within the folder for this day. And I've created this is the time lapse. This is basically the time lapse folder. Now this was the end product. So what I'm going to do normally is I'm going to take all 90 of these pictures, and I'm not going to do this because I've already done it, because it takes a while for Photoshop to take care of this. But I would go up here and do photo, and then I would go to edit in, and all the way down here at the bottom, it says open as layers in Photoshop. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're going to open as layers in Photoshop. Okay, so I've already done that because it, like I said, it does take a little bit of time. So now I'm going to go into.
Lynn, I may have missed it a while ago. How many
Yeah.
pictures can you sync at a time? Does it matter, or do you just choose a certain amount?
However many you want.
Okay, there's no
Yeah,
limit.
I mean, obviously, the longer you go and the more images you have, the more of a motion you're going to show in your end result. Like
Okay.
I said, this was 10 minutes. The wind was blowing fairly well. I mean, it wasn't like super blowing, but there was enough movement in the clouds where I knew I would get some motion once I did this process. Okay. All right, let's go to, where is Photoshop? Here we go. Okay, now we're going to go to Photoshop. And Photoshop, as you can see over here, has got all the layers. There's 90 layers over here. And I'm going to move this out of my way. So there's 90 layers over here. Okay. So the first thing you want to do, and as you can see, there's no fancy cloud stuff going on here at all. First thing you're going to do is you're going to select all of your layers. So I'm going to go, I selected the first one. I'm going to shift and select all of them. And everybody thinks this is so difficult, but I'll tell you what, this is the easiest thing in the world to do. You go up here to the blend mode, which is right here, and you have all these options, okay? Well, you pick lighten, and voila. You have your painterly clouds with motion in them, okay?
Wow.
So you can see this cloud over here is not as good as these, because this one wasn't moving that much. Obviously, it was kind of going that direction, but these are moving this way. So you've got this painterly look. I mean, so now the only problem is in this particular issue, or in this particular image, I've got all these flowers that are obviously moving around because there is some wind. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unselect all these. I'm going to take this one here. You can pick any one you want. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to duplicate that one layer. Okay. And then it's going to make this copy right here. And so then on this one, I'm going to make a mask. And black reveals, white hides. So I'm going to have, I need a, hold on a second. I
Black
need,
reveals and white hides.
It's the other way, Lynn. You got it back.
the other way around. I'm sorry, it's the other way. So I'm gonna use my black brush and make it pretty big. And I have my opacity at 100% and my flow at 100%, so this goes quickly. But as you can see, black reveals actually. Because I'm pulling out, see the mask over here, all this stuff. And so now I'm taking away all the movement that was in these flowers so that I don't have a blurry flower garden here. So yeah, I could. So anyway, then once I'm done with this, because to me it's a little flat and a little overexposed looking because I lightened it basically. I would take this, I would collapse all these layers and then take it over into Lightroom and do my adjustments over there. You could do it in Photoshop if you're good in Photoshop and you know how to do all the adjustments here. You can do it here as well. But I just collapse it all, make it one image, and then I pull it over into Lightroom and finish it over there. And so when I end up, it looks like this. This one's a little crispy because it's got a little bit of stuff going on here. I did it quickly this afternoon, so.
I'm confused about something. How did just changing the blending, I must have missed something and I was paying attention.
No, that's all it is. All it is changing the blend mode.
But how did changing the blending mode to lighten create motion?
Because it's the way it works on these clouds, because the clouds are moving.
So okay, maybe I was focused on the flower.
Remember, forget about the flowers. You've got multiple images going on, you got 90 images here. And if you look at these, as you can see the clouds move as I move through them.
Yeah.
Clouds moving just a little bit. And so if you take all of those and put them together, the way Photoshop works with the lighten mode, somebody discovered this somewhere along the line a few years ago. And it just makes the picture and makes the clouds do this. And it also has, if you're shooting clouds over water, it does the same sort of thing.
I guess I was focused on the flowers because I'm looking at the flowers.
Yeah, this is
and I'm like, I
about
don't
the
see
motion
it
in the sky, not the flowers. We don't want any motion in the flowers.
No, that's okay. All right.
Yeah. So
is this being recorded?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep. So yeah, it's this, like I said, this one is not the best image for this because motion is supposed to be the primary subject, when in this picture it's the flowers. But I just wanted, this is the only thing I had available that was going to work that I could show you. So does anybody else have any questions?
No, it makes sense what you're saying about showing the motion in the background, how to do it. These are offshoots, opportunities of getting something in your tool well or toolbox that whenever you're out there, you can produce these options. So that, yeah, I get it. Yeah, good deal.
Hey, yeah, so I have a question, Lynn. So if we went like to Fort DeSoto and did the waves there, like if you happen to have a wavy thing, could you do the same thing with that? Like if you wanted to.
We will do it to a certain extent, but this is mostly about clouds.
Okay.
One of these pictures I've ever seen has been about, mostly it's about the clouds. Now, like I said, like I've seen some where the water was the water was, there was water and then the clouds were over the water. But I've seen some over the land as well. It's just a matter of, what you're doing, what you want to, this one, I wanted that painterly look in the sky, but I wanted the flowers to look normal. So
well, why not just do a neutral density filter, long exposure, and also a fast shutter speed and combine those two?
Because it wouldn't look exactly the same. It would just be a long drawn out smooth line like those ones that Jim had in his. Remember the clouds where he had the purple sky at the beach? That's what happens when you do a long exposure. Different thing. So this is like taking pictures and you're taking them all. There's time in between. It's kind of like, a time lapse. Here, let me stop sharing here. A time lapse, it looks smooth, but you can see if you watch it closely, it's like da 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 da, because a time lapse is one. It's not a video. It's not taking a smooth picture. It's taking images like this, and that's kind of what this is doing as well. It's when it blends together, it's not exactly smooth like a long exposure would be.
So if you didn't have a windy sky, and you wanted to try out using your intervalometer, which I have no idea where it is on my camera, what other subjects could you use it on?
I mean, pretty much any. I mean, you could. I've used time lapse to that. One of the things that Jim showed us tonight was to create those little GIFs. So you could do a time lapse. I mean, you could do a time lapse that can last 10 or 15 seconds. The one he showed us was 20 images from a 50 or 500 image time lapse that he took, and it just lasted for 3 seconds. But you could take a time lapse with your camera that makes kind of like, you've seen time lapses all the, it's the clouds going across the sky and stuff like that. That's taking it and making it actually move. Okay, this is taking it and making it a time lapse, basically stand still. So you're seeing all that time in front of your face, all
Like
in one
a flower
picture.
that's, you keep on a flower that starts to bud or open up.
Say that again, Victoria, sorry.
Like is this kind of like a flower that's starting to open up, goes from a bud to a flower?
Yeah,
That would be time lapse.
That would be time lapse.
Right.
That with time lapse. Yeah, this is a different holding. I mean, this is like I said, it's this particular technique is trying to make that painterly look in the sky. And if you have water, it will work a little bit on the water as well.
Okay.
But it's not for your normal time lapse, but it's using what you would use to do those. But it's combining them all into one image in Photoshop. So
Lynn, you took 90 images in 10 minutes. What would happen if you took 20 images in 10 minutes? What would the effect be on the photo?
I think it would be a little more choppy because there's so much in between. There'd be stuff missing in between. I haven't tried that. I've done a couple of different shutter speeds and different lengths of time, and some of them worked. I've been having an issue with one of my cameras with the time lapse, so I've got to figure out what's going on with it, or I would have had more for you. But
Is that a Nikon camera?
yeah, it's my Nikon Z, my Z7. Something I think when I was at the flower field, I overdid it with the time lapse because I probably took, I don't know, between two different times I was there, I took somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 images on time lapse.
The Nikon, it does have to have time to rest.
Yeah, it has to have time to rest, like 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
The
So,
Sony just keeps going.
But I mean, this is just a different,
where?
more creative way to show motion in the clouds. So just thought you guys would be interested in it because it's something I saw and I thought it was cool. And so I figured out how to do it and then I did it. So
Very nice. Thank you.
And Diana, if you're gonna do the wave you at the beach, you're gonna have to invite some football fans.
Why?
The
So they can-
wave.
Oh, Jesus, Robert, you need a vacation.
I thought you just had one.
Hey, Robert?
Yeah.
Can't we do basically the same thing? I forgot now, but I used it's either the radial or the motion blur.
You
And you
can
click
do
on
the
the cloud
motion
and drag it.
blur. You can do the motion blur. That's another deal, and then mask it out.
Yeah, that
That's
makes it
another way of
easier.
doing it.
Whoa, say that again one more time.
Motion blur inside of Photoshop.
Photoshop.
Yeah, you just click on motion blur. And then you go up and click on the cloud and you drag it a little ways. So it blurs it and it'll show you what direction it's blurring
Is
in.
that a filter in the
Yes.
That's in Photoshop.
The only thing about those type of things now, when you're doing a Photoshop, is that it has to be believable. And the more, as Lynn pointed out, the more frames you shoot, the more it becomes more believable rather than when you do a motion blur inside of Photoshop, if you're not masking well. So the whole point is to make things as realistic as possible or as fake as possible.
Or creative as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people drag the clouds in the wrong direction. And that's a giveaway. You have to know which direction those clouds should be going.
Yeah.
So we've had no discussion tonight at all about panning.
That's because
some.
there's no gold around.
There's no what? Oh my
Gold.
God. I need wine. I need some wine.
Go for it.
Did I understand correctly that we can turn in a gift for this upcoming competition?
Yes,
Absolutely.
for the October one. Yeah, for
Yeah.
capture motion, yes.
For
Not
October,
September,
yeah.
October.
Okay.
That'll be a long meeting.
Yeah. No, they're gonna be short. They're only 3 seconds. I'm gonna have to figure out how to handle those because obviously they all come to me, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Lynn, you won't get one from me.
Or me.
But it's just you're trying to expand your horizon, guys. And panning is one. I'm surprised he sort of mentioned it, but he didn't really do it. But we've done panning before, so it is a way of basically you have a slow shutter speed and you click, and you should have a blur behind the subject, and your subject should be more or less sharp.
But didn't he do that with the trolley cars in Ybor?
Yeah. Well, no, that's
He did motion,
That's the opposite.
huh?
That's the opposite, because in panning, your background is out of focus and your subject is sharp. With that trolley car, the background was in focus and the subject was moving.
And how did he shoot that again? That was the one.
You do a slow shutter speed, and as you have to move with your subject.
I got it.
And you click, and it's not easy, believe me. It's great to practice with.
He was on a tripod, right? Lynn, the one in Ybor, he was on a tripod.
Yeah, he was on a tripod because he was not at night.
So wait a minute. When did he click, Lynn?
With the trolley car?
Yeah.
He just clicked when it went by, but he had a slow shutter speed.
Right, got it.
It's not panning, okay?
It's not panning.
Now,
I got it.
if I may please, the panning shot he did show was in the skating ring with the people moving around. He panned that shot.
Right.
Yeah, with those two cameras.
Yeah, but it's still panning.
Yeah, he was panning and got the pan blur with the first camera, and then in this particular instance, rather than the second camera took the sharp shot. So, but you could do that to a certain extent with your camera by itself. I mean, there's pictures, you can see pictures of cars where the background is blurry and the car is pretty much in focus. So I've done it with horses. I mean, it's a doable thing. It takes some practice, and you got to have something that's going by a lot of times because it takes practice. So, like the best place to do it is, stand by the side of a road and try it. You may not have it's surprising how good a shot like that is, it's a great way to get rid of all the crap in the background because you're blurring everything in the background and your car is in focus. So, or you could do it with a motorcycle person or a person on a bike. It's, if a lot of the sports people, they're taking a panning shot of the guy on the bike and the bike is stopped in motion, but you can see you're implying implied motion because the background is all blurry, and it's got a direction to it. So you're going like, click.
So just to clarify, if there's a car, if I'm standing on the side of the road and there's a car and it's coming towards me, right? And I click my shutter and I just do nothing because the slow shutter speed will do it by itself.
No, to pan, you've got to move the camera.
You still have to pan, even though you've got the slow shutter speed.
Yeah.
Then the car's gonna be blurry.
Yeah, no, the background, if you do it properly, the background will be blurry and then the car should be fairly in focus.
Right, but if you're standing there, the car's moving, the car will be blurry.
Yes, you're moving. Yeah. Remember, you're moving at the same speed you're panning at the same speed as what you're shooting. So your background is standing still and you're moving with the speed of your car. So if your car is going like this and your camera is going with the car, you're going to be right on that car. And when you shoot it, it should be in focus.
I thought I understood Diana saying that, she would take the picture as a car went by rather than.
You got to move with the car.
Right. Okay, wait. Yeah, Victoria got my question right. But so I'm going to see the car. The car is there. It's on Dale Mabry.
Yeah.
I see the car. I hit the shutter button and
How
then I move.
No, well, there's two different things. If you want the a car to be blurry, like the trolley car in Ybor City, then you wouldn't move the camera.
You
Okay?
would not?
You would not. If you want the background to be blurry, but the car in focus, then you move with the car and shoot it. And so your background is going to be blurry because you're moving, but your car should be in focus because your camera is moving with the car.
It's like a bird in flight.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Same thing.
Exactly. But because we want the black background to be blurry, when we shoot the birds in flight, we're shooting at a high
High
shutter
shutter
speed.
speed, yeah.
But you could do a bird too the same way, and you would have a blurry background. You just got to slow. But the problem with bird is because they move around so much, you can't exactly. You got to have, at least in my estimation, I've got to have a high shutter speed so that I don't have a bird that's out of focus.
Yeah, yeah.
When you're shooting a car or a bicycle or something that you know the path that they're going to take, then you can slow it down, your shutter speed down, and end up blurring your background and getting a sharp picture of the car or the bike or whatever.
So if I stick my husband on a bicycle, right? I push my shutter and then I follow him as he takes the bike.
No, you don't push your shutter until you follow him with your camera. Then when you get him where you want, click, and you should have a.
Okay, I got it.
No, you're moving and you're clicking at the same time, so you can't stop. You have to move with him and click, and then you should have a blurry background, and he should be fairly in focus.
But you have
study.
But you have to have your shutter down in order to capture what you've shot.
Exactly.
No.
100%.
Yeah.
Well,
No, you're thinking, is she using back button focus?
yeah.
Yeah, it's still the same thing. You just
Yeah,
press your shutter
so you
down.
push it down, you're pushing down your back button focus, and as you're moving with the car, you click, and you just keep going. So it's like a click, and you're going to have a background, like I said, it's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of practice, but it can be done.
Okay.
And people do it all the time. So,
All right.
yeah, so I mean, yeah, what he showed was the exact opposite of this. He was standing still in a long exposure that made it blur. So
Okay. Stay tuned.
maybe we should have we haven't done a panning shoot in a long time, Robert. Maybe that's something we need to consider.
Sure.
That would be lovely.
You know what else I was thinking about? One of those, we used to, a long time ago, did a BMX bike shoot at one of those little places.
Yeah.
I would love for the club to do that again.
Well, we
That'd be
did
fun, yeah.
There's a place up in North Lake here, up
Yeah.
north of, north
Lake
of,
Park, yeah.
no.
Yeah, we also
Lake Park,
done
yeah.
motocross. That was even more fun, but it's dangerous as crap.
Yeah, motocross, that sort of thing would be good.
Yeah, motocross is fun and it's dangerous, but it is so much fun.
Guys, there's
Skateboarders.
How
there's
fast
something
does
else to
you,
the panning. For you that are right eye dominant, it's much easier because your left eye can still track the target.
Yeah.
If you're trying to focus on something, once you started panning, you're going to fall behind the object and it's going to be blurred and you will not have a sharp picture. You have to have a constant, once you start, you should have everything pre-focused as to where the bicycle rider is going to be passing you or a car or whatever else. That should be pre-focused. Forget that after that. And then as your subject comes by, when you're ready, you push the shutter button, you hold it down until you're finished and let off. Do not stop.
Yeah.
When you let up on the shutter
going.
button or you hear it go click. You
Yeah.
you have to keep moving. You don't believe that that's true, but trust me, your shot will be worthless
Yeah.
if you stop. You
stop.
must
You
keep
gotta
moving.
keep-
Go through with the swing.
You gotta be coordinated. You gotta be able to go and you gotta be able to keep your subject. So you start with it on, you look in your viewfinder and you find it before it's gonna be where you want it. Basically, you want it to be in front of you. You don't want to take it over here. You don't want to take it over there. You want to take it in front of you so that you've got a you're on the same plane as as what you're shooting. And so as you're going along, you get it in your eyes, you got it, you're getting it, as soon as it's that right spot, you click it, but you keep going. You click and you keep moving the camera until it's, until you, and then you look at the picture, did I get it? I did not. Like I said, it's something you need to practice with something that's, so cars are the easiest thing to do because you can stand by a highway and shoot all day long,
I will interject just a little variation on what you're saying, Lynn. If you want to know some settings to start with, let's start with 1/30th to 1/8 of a second. 1/30th to 1/8. You set your focus mode to continuous. Focus mode to continuous. Set your drive mode to high. So that means you're going to be making multiple frames. You want to start shooting as the person is about 45 degrees out.
Yep.
And then as they go by, you're going to lay on that shutter button so that your camera can make multiple frames. As it's making multiple frames, somewhere in there will be a good frame. So you want to carry that through all the way until the person goes past you, 45 degrees past you.
So when you're talking about continuous focus, you're talking about AI servo.
AI servo and continuous shooting.
Yeah, high speed.
Drive
like
mode is set to continuous. So we
Mhm.
have both of those in play.
And so 1/30th to 1/8 seconds.
1/8 of a second, yes.
And what was the ISO? Does it matter?
ISO is going to be constant. Constant. You want it, the ISO general is always depend on the lighting conditions.
Mhm.
So somewhere between 100 and 800.
Okay.
Now that is a formula to start.
Recipe for planning.
As Lynn pointed out, this ain't an easy task, and with all tasks where you get great results, it's going to take a lot of practice.
So I believe, I don't know the gentleman's name.
Chris?
Yeah, you. Raise your hand. So you said, like, if I put my husband like here, right? Like right in front of me or at 45 degrees to me and focus my camera on him and then went to the other corner and then I'm not sure how the guy.
You can use continuous focus. If the camera's all that good, I prefer to just, where am I going to typically take the shot? I measure off how far that is. I focus on that spot. And then I'm ready for whenever somebody comes by or a car comes by. Where I get this from is I shoot every weekend. Tomorrow morning I'll get up, I'll go out and shoot clay targets. And you have to constantly keep moving when you do this. You know pretty much where you see a target from a long way off, but you want to know where it's going to pass you and how fast you need to be moving with the target and so forth. My problem with the camera is after every Saturday, I'm used to pulling ahead of the target. So I have to keep myself from doing that with the camera. The shotgun, I have to pull ahead in order to hit it. But you know where you're going, so you can focus there, and then you just get into the rhythm. And like everything else that Jim showed us tonight, some of the things he talked about took him hours to get a particular shot. So it's going to take a lot of practice to get the panning down. But you have cars going by and other things going on, and go down and do some street photography and just get people that are walking and see if you can stay with them. They're slower.
Yeah. But Diana, all the subjects are moving. That's the point.
Okay.
Don't stop moving.
Yeah.
You're moving. You don't have to turn all the way around, but I mean, just
you're moving. So.
I guess why I was confused though is if you focus like here, and can you see my hands?
Yep.
Yeah.
If you focus here, right? And then you keep moving, because you're continuous focus. Okay, it's IBF. Okay, I think
here comes the problem. It's just like me in a shotgun. If I happen to take a look at the front side of my shotgun, I will always fall behind my target and miss. I can never allow myself to do that. So that's why I'm saying if you pre-focus,
Okay.
then you don't want to be looking at your focus dot.
Yeah.
You want to be, are you a right eye? Do you shoot with your right eye or left eye?
Yes.
Right
Yes.
eye? Okay.
Yeah.
That way your left eye can keep track of your husband going on the bike
Right.
and you're not tempted to try to keep the focus spot on him. You'll have a
Got it.
much smoother pass. I'm left eye dominant, so I have more problems. than
I'm
you.
gonna try it tomorrow. He doesn't know that yet.
Poor
Yeah.
Lauren.
Tell him you need him for a whole day.
That's gonna go over really big. Thank you. Sorry for monopolizing
That's
it,
why I
but
say,
it was,
Diana, cars are easier because they're bigger and
Yeah.
they're going by all the time. So you don't make anybody mad by, making
Do
them
it
go back
again, do it again.
100 times. So
Let me tell you what happens. I'm an instructor for what I do. And I take people out to a highway to practice just pointing at a car. I said, just point at somebody going by in a car and try to keep your finger pointed at that person. So next thing you know, they're working real hard at doing that. And then all of a sudden I say, where are you pointing now? And they find out, they go, oh, I'm in the back seat. How'd that happen? Because you're trying too hard to aim.
yeah,
yeah.
you just kind of go
So,
with the flow.
You just
Ooh.
want to stay in the box. You'll get them.
All right.
All right.
I
Any other
got it.
questions?
Man, this was a good night.
It was.
Good
Thank
night.
you, everybody. This has
Hey,
been
Robert,
great.
can you stick around for a minute? I need to ask you something.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Travel
Let me say
safely,
goodnight.
Robert.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you,
weekend.
everybody.
Weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for indulging my questions. Appreciate it.
Always, always.
Asking questions
Bye-bye.
that people want to
Thank you,
know.
Lynn. Thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome.
Thanks.